1x Developer Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 1x Developer Podcast. It's me, Colin.
And me, Brendan.
Hey, I was actually thinking, what do you think about doing Whose Side Are You On at the beginning of the episode? Because I'm pretty sure no one makes it to the end.
I think that's pretty common with any podcast or anything. That your number of people who listen to the beginning versus number of people who listen at the end is way less.
People are going to drop
sure.
off.
Yeah, sure. I'm down for Whose Side Are You On at the beginning.
Also, how do you feel about changing Whose Side Are You On to just, I don't have a name, but just like Question of the Week or something? Because when we did What's the Most American Programming Language, that one was a lot of fun. That's not a Whose Side Are You On, but it's fun.
Oh, you're right. That's not okay. I agree that was one of our best. That was probably one of my favorites in a long time. So,
okay,
yeah.
All right, so here it is. This is one I came up with the other day. So we need some kind of phrase for the sort of I guess it's kind of a oh geez, what's the word? Oh, fallacy. It's sort of a logical fallacy where something is new to you and you believe it's interesting, but it's actually just new. So an example is I remember just on Hacker News one time, I saw this dude, he was talking about some language and talking about how it's the greatest language ever. And somebody in the replies was like, no, this language is just your current fascination, right? It's just the thing that you're learning right now. This is something that happens a lot. I think everyone goes through this with functional programming at some point, right? Mm-hmm. They do a functional language, and for a while they're like, yeah, everything needs to be like this. But then they move on to the next language, and then they're like, yeah, everything needs to be like this, actually. I feel like, is there a word for this? Is there...
That's a good question. I feel like that's a well-known phenomenon. I don't know a word for it, though.
I mean, I guess it's kind of like recency bias, but it's more than that.
Right. It has to be something that's I don't know, maybe that captures it. I think it's almost more than just a bias, though. It's I don't know, you discovered this thing and you want to impose it on everyone kind of thing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Recency bias comes close, I think, though. That's not bad.
Right. It's kind of like recency bias mixed with confirmation bias also. Maybe there's a little bit of that too. You decided to learn this thing, so you've decided it's the best thing.
Right. Yeah. Is that the question of the week?
That's the question. What is that thing?
Sorry. Okay, yeah.
Here's what I wrote in my notes. What do you call it when someone learns a new language and believes it's the best thing ever for a few months or so?
I'll tell you where I'm really guilty of this is with a lot of the productivity stuff. Whatever, for a long time, whatever I was into at the moment, whatever my bujo looked like or whatever, I was like, this is the right way. Everyone needs to do it this way.
What do you mean, like techniques, like the Pareto timer thing, or that stuff like that? Or
yeah. I tried time blocking and it really helped me. Everyone needs to time block. And I feel like the productivity books and the productivity culture are very, there's people love to pretend that some of this stuff is very evidence-based and not just kind of subjective. And, it's not just that it worked for me. It's that there's science behind it and it will work for everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and there's a little bit of that, this is the revolutionary thing. This is the one solution. Once you do this, everything, it's when in reality, there's multiple things that go into your productivity.
And the industry kind of goes through these. It's deep work, it's atomic habits, it's bullet journal. It's like there are these things that like are touted as the solution to everything. But
Right.
yes, there's
It's kind of
multiple
similar to
things that
like
go into the
fad
productivity.
diets, right?
Very much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Uh, yeah, that was like the craziest suicidal one we've ever had. But let's try this for a while, I guess.
Sure.
All right. So today's episode is about Git LFS.
Git LFS. Yeah.
That is interesting. Why do we sometimes spell the thing and sometimes say it as a word?
I think part of it is that LFS has no vowels.
Oh, well, and Git doesn't stand for something, does it? Like it's just called Git, right?
Yeah, I don't think Git's an acronym.
So the name is just Git, yeah. So that's part of it.
But yeah, LFS is an acronym and it has no vowels. It's not. I think sometimes even if something's an acronym, we'll pronounce it if it like is easy to pronounce.
Right, yeah. So I guess let's start with what is Git, just so that everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, so Git is a distributed version control system, mostly used for source code, but that distinction kind of becomes relevant later on. But yeah, it's used for anyone who doesn't know like the basics of Git. It's basically for controlling changes over time to a code base. So if me and Colin are working on the same code, I make a change on my computer and I push it to the repo, and then Colin can pull down my changes and he'll have those changes that I made on his computer, and then vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. People have asked me this, like people who are non-tech people, that they ask me like, how do you like all work on the same thing at once without everybody screwing everything up? And the answer is Git, basically.
Yeah. And Git is not the first version control system. It probably won't be the last, but it's definitely the king right now, I would say.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's the one that most people use. And I think especially because I feel like GitHub in particular kind of like made its way outside of programmer space. I think there's a lot of people who know GitHub because of like popular news stories where they'll like release I don't know, a batch of scientific data or something on GitHub.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who honestly don't even know that there's a difference between Git and GitHub. They think it's like all one thing together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have
Sure,
you
that's
used any
true.
other source control stuff
Yeah,
in your
yeah.
career?
So when I started at my current job, we were on Subversion. I've used Subversion a little bit from like in open source projects back in the day. And before that, what was the one called? I think it was called CVS.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yeah, it's something like that.
I keep wanting to say CSV, but I think it's CVS. But the big difference with Git, though, is it's what's called distributed, meaning that every person has a complete copy of the code base on their hard drive. And so that was not,
Right.
that wasn't the case for Subversion. You would check out like specific files to make changes, if I remember right.
The only other one I used is the Microsoft one. And I think it's just called like Microsoft Source Control or Microsoft Version Control, something like that. And it was like that where you had to like check out the file and then like you were the one using it while it was checked out or something. It was I never really wrapped my head around it. I didn't use that much either. But yeah, Git is like definitely like the one right now.
That's I was kind of there for that change over to distributed version control, and I feel like that was one of the fastest changes I've ever seen in terms of like adoption. I felt like it happened when Git came on the scene, and there was this other one called Mercurial, which I think people still use, but those two were both distributed version control, and it was just like so obviously so much better that
Yeah.
people adopted to it really quick.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Mercurial because that was something that I kind of wanted to. That was something on my notes to bring up in this episode because I know that Facebook and I think Google use Mercurial,
Hmm.
and the the reasoning that people say online is basically just that Git has like scaling issues at some in some way. Apparently, Facebook has like repos that are just like bigger than like the Linux kernel, and like it's just so enormous, and Git struggles with that. But and Mercurial doesn't, I guess. I don't know. Um, I feel like maybe that could be related to Git LFS. I don't really know anything about Git LFS. What is that?
Okay, so Git LFS is an extension to Git that allows you to work with large binary files. And so it's important now to take a step back and say, like, why can't we work with large binary files in the normal Git? So basically, the reason is that when Git is recording things kind of in its internal database, it records like basically each commit in Git is a snapshot of the entire code base at the time that you make that commit, right? And so
Mhm.
at any time you can check out an individual commit, and the code base on your file system will reflect the code base at the time the person made the commit is the
Right.
ideal. So normally Git will store in its internal database, it'll store like these objects, which are the contents of the file, but it does some like performance optimizations and stuff like that, where it can store only the diffs between source code files. So source code files
Mm.
are usually text. It can just store only the diff and not the entire contents of the file. Well, when it comes to images, movies, audio files, these can't be diffed or merged. So we can't do that same thing of just storing the diffs. We have to, every time that file changes, we have to store the entire file, right? So there's no way to calculate the diff between, even if one small byte changes in a PSD file, you got to store the whole 50 megabyte PSD, and Git will have both versions in its internal database, right?
Okay, that makes sense. So like, I'm trying to think of like a use case. Like if I work at NASA where they have like these 16K images taken from a telescope or whatever, and uh, I don't know, I have one from yesterday that was messed up, and they actually had a mistake, so I modify the text. I take the image and I modify the text in the image or something, and I make a change. That giant file is actually existing twice in my, I guess, internal database is the best way to say it, right?
Yeah,
In within Git.
within Git, within the Git repo, it has to store references to both of those enormous images, just in case you check out the commit from before that had the messed up image, right?
Right. So, because that was one thing I was wondering, like, what are the kind of use cases for this? Because, as you said, like most of the time with Git, we're talking about code, and we're not talking about files that are that big, and we're talking about files that can be diffed. So this is, yeah. I mean, like, are there some other like real world examples of like where people would use Git LFS?
Well, I think there are a lot of cases where code has binary assets. It has, binary blobs that are in addition to the code, right? Any kind of like image generation software, or maybe you have
Mm.
like, I don't know, I'm trying to think good. But yeah, like image, or let's say you're making an audio plugin, there might be like large sample
Oh
libraries or
yeah.
something like that, right? So I think there's a lot of situations where code sits side by side with binary images, binary objects. But I
Yeah.
think there are even cases where maybe there's no code at all. Like let's say a design agency wants to track different versions of a logo they're making for a client, something like that, right? It might be helpful to have those versions stored in Git with a because that way you get a commit message and a log of like how the logo progressed over time. But because of what we just talked about, your Git repo, if you do that, is just going to grow and grow and grow and grow until the point where it's really unmanageable.
Okay, cool. So we install Git LFS
You
and
install, yep, you install Git LFS to solve this problem, and basically, Git LFS is an extension to Git, which I want to talk to because that's a little bit of an ill-defined term, and I kind of like
right.
spent some time trying to really figure out what a Git extension is. But the basic point is that it replaces your any of these large binary objects. You choose which kinds of files, so you can do like all JPEGs or all PNGs or whatever, and it replaces those in your repository with just a small pointer to an object somewhere else. So it could even be somewhere else on your hard drive, but usually it's like out on a server somewhere, right?
Hmm.
And so so basically all of those versions are still stored somewhere. There's no magic going on here that's allowing you to diff these images. You're still storing every version, but it's not all stored within your Git repo. So and then Git LFS has kind of like mechanisms to make sure that the versions of those binary objects they reflect what was happening at the time of that commit, right? So when you check out a specific commit, Git LFS makes sure that you have on disk at that time the binary object that corresponds to that commit.
Okay. So
Does that make
that's kind
sense?
of hard for me to wrap my head around at first. Like, so if I have the the repo with like the telescope image or whatever, and let's say the image is on my hard drive, right? I'm using Git LFS. So then when you pull the repo, you don't have the image, do you?
I will get, when I clone the repo, I will get one of those images. I'll get the one corresponding to where head is the current main branch, basically.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah,
So like if someone's using Git LFS and you go to their GitHub, will you like be able to see the image or whatever? The file that's being referenced?
that's a good question. When I tested this out, yes, I was able to do that. I was able to go to GitHub and view the image, and I don't know why. I guess it must have just been, I mean, maybe it's the same kind of mechanism where when you're looking at, the most current, because like when you go to GitHub and view a repo, you are viewing it at a specific commit, right? Even though it's
Right. I mean, you can
usually
see
the
like
most current one.
yeah, you can view like whatever's in there, like images or whatever.
Yeah. So that all worked pretty seamlessly when I tried it on GitHub, at least. Um, but I think it must be doing kind of the same thing where it's pulling the version of the image that corresponds to the commit you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the gist of it, is like, instead of having all of these versions of all of these files on your hard drive and in your Git repo, clogging stuff up, slowing things down, you just have like one version of the image that corresponds to your current commit. And Git
Nice.
LFS kind of like takes care of all of that. I'll say that when I'd never tried it out before, when I tried it, it was pretty nice. It was pretty seamless.
I mean, was it easy to get set up?
Super easy. So
Cool.
I documented my steps here. So the installation, I'm on a Mac here, so I did homebrew. But I just did a brew install git -lfs. That installs kind of like the main commands for it and all that. And then you have to do a per repo command, which is git LFS install. So for every repo that you want to use LFS with, you have to install git LFS on that repo, and that installs some like hooks and stuff to make it work right for that repo.
Right.
And then you just have to choose which files to track. and that's kind of it. You
So then
know,
from there, you're doing your basic, like your normal Git commands, like you're committing and pulling and pushing like normal.
yep, yeah, you, yeah, okay. So let's get into that, like kind of how Git LFS works, because it's pretty ingenious. I was kind of surprised about how seamless it is. So, like if you go on Wikipedia, I think it'll describe Git LFS as a Git extension, and I was like, what is an extension? So Git doesn't really have an API or an SDK or anything like that that people can use.
Right.
So there's a few different mechanisms people can use to integrate with Git. The first thing is that if you have a command that's like git dash something and it's available in your path, Git will execute that as if you do git space LFS, right? So like when you do
Hmm.
when you do git space LFS, it's actually executing a command git dash LFS that's located somewhere, wherever, somewhere on in your
Okay.
user bin or whatever.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that is, yeah, I think the best way you could describe that is with the word extension, really.
Yeah, I think extension's perfectly reasonable for that.
But yeah, but it's not like it's not like a plugin like your Chrome plugin, which has like a store that you add on or whatever.
That's what I think of as an extension is plugin is the right word. Like I think of you're using some other program's API to like write something that integrates with the program. This is really just more like a convention, I guess. It's like if you have a file named this, Git will execute it for you when you do this.
Right.
So that's kind of like that's one of the things that installing the git-lfs package, like from Homebrew or from downloading it from the website or whatever, that's part of what it takes care of. Then the other thing is there are Git hooks that get triggered by various Git actions. So those happen like when you commit, when you merge, when you push, when you pull, that kind of stuff. And Git LFS has a few of those that get executed. I think that stuff mostly happens on push and pull, where it like uploads the files to servers and pulls the assets as necessary.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
And then there's a third thing called filter drivers, which I was not at all familiar with, but are pretty interesting, which transform the contents of files when they're checked in and when they're checked out. So there's kind of this analogy that Git has about the two filter drivers are called clean and smudge. And so it's basically like when you add a file to the staging area in Git, it runs this clean command on it. And you can do anything you want in there. I imagine most companies use that to like run black over Python code or run it through a linter or something like that. So nothing will be allowed into the staging area that hasn't like passed these tests or whatever.
Right. Okay. So do you use pre-commit hooks on any of your projects?
No, I never really have.
So I have for a few, and that's kind of sounds like what you're talking about, where there's like a pre-commit. I don't think it's an extension, right? Like I don't even remember how you set up pre-commit hooks, but yeah, I mean you'll run like code formatting or something, and like if you do, well, it'll be on commit actually, so you can stage it, but when you do commit, it'll run that stuff, and it'll say like, oh no, this failed, you got to try again or whatever.
I'm a little bit fuzzy on the difference between hooks and filter drivers. Maybe someone in the comments can clarify that for me. But
Yeah, I think pre-commit runs on hooks.
yeah, and Git LFS does use hooks also. I can't remember which ones, but you set those up by going into your .git directory, and there's a hooks directory in there, and you can like by default it's populated with a bunch of samples you can check out. But I've never really messed around with that. Tell me again what you do with them. You run like you're running
Code
linters and
formatting.
stuff.
Yeah, I've also had like the test suite set up. So when you do commit, it'll just run the test suite. You can make it do like anything. I'm looking again now. So like the pre-commit project is like you install it with pip,
Mm.
uh, and yeah, the example they use is like running black. You just have like a YAML file that describes what you want it to do. Oh, I've also had have I've also had ones that required like a certain format for commit messages, like the Jira ticket number needs to be in it or something. It'll like
Uh,
just reject the commit if it doesn't have the commit, if it doesn't have the ticket number, something like that.
that makes sense. And that's so sorry. That's at commit time or at push time?
That's a commit.
Okay. So, you know, I may not have this 100% right, but I think what's going on with Git LFS is that you git add a binary file, the git add filter driver runs clean and replaces
Okay.
the binary object with a pointer to the object, and then it stores the binary object like in a different location temporarily. And then when you
Mhm.
push, it runs I think like a post push hook or a pre push hook. And that's when the actual upload to the LFS server happens. And then I think that LFS somehow marks it as like, gets rid of it on the file system or something.
That makes sense, or like that sounds right, because this would have to happen before you even stage it, or you'd have to
Right.
be something. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Like there's kind of this interesting thing that to think about there that I've never really needed to make this distinction, but there's almost this distinction between the Git repo and the file system, right? When you think about these filter driver commands of clean and smudge, it's like the stuff in the Git repo is cleaned, has been cleaned. And so when you
Mhm.
check something into the Git repo, it gets cleaned. When you check something out, when you check out a specific commit, those files get smudge ran on them so that they're now dirty and they're part of the file system, right? The file system is dirty, the repo is clean.
Right. Yeah. So what exactly does that mean when it gets smudged? Like what is happening?
Smudge is replacing the pointer with the actual binary object. So
Okay. Okay.
it's just the reverse of clean. Instead of it's taking that pointer and it's making photo1.jpg an actual binary image.
Okay. And so you talked about the LFS server, which is I think I read that that could be like lots of different things, right? Like the file could be like anywhere.
Yeah, you can set up your own LFS server. Um, so I didn't mess around with that too much. And for GitHub, it was able to quickly just use the defaults, and GitHub let me use their storage space. Thanks.
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
I think they have like pricing around that. They have limits on different tiers and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But the gist of it is that like there's some default naming conventions around the LFS server that I think for GitHub and I think for other popular services, they're just going to work out of the box. But you can totally set up your own LFS URL. You can set up your own LFS server. You can do it all yourself if you want.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I definitely can see how this could be useful. Like, I think especially for game dev, right? And you've got like, you're making a 3D game. You've got a lot of really big files that aren't, they're not like, uh, how do you say? They're not like text files that can be diffed easily. They're, big old things,
Yeah,
and they're going to change too, right?
I can't. I kind of think of it honestly as part of the part of the creative process of making art or making music, that you have like all of these different iterations on the same kind of file, and you end up with kind of these crazy names sometimes. It'll be like
Yeah.
version 4 with reverb, just
Yeah.
not that one, the other one .mp3. And it's like,
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've all been there with like the essay, right? Where it's like final draft, actually final,
yeah,
complete to send,
yeah,
rough draft, or whatever.
right.
We've all been there.
do a rough draft, do not send. Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's a good case for if you're disciplined about it, maybe that's a good case for like putting that all in a Git repo. You can always go back to any previous version, but it's not, you don't have all of those just like clogging up a folder.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big proponent of like, I think Git is like this untapped tool that like tons of people outside of software should be using it.
Yeah.
I've talked to people who like have told me that they at their jobs they have like a shared server, and they just like tell each other to not touch a file while somebody else is touching it, or like I'm in this but don't touch it so it doesn't get corrupted. And like people are still like emailing files and stuff like it. There's like I almost feel like Git is like something that should just be taught in high schools.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this issue right here is one of the big reasons why, normies, non-software developers can't really use it, because like if you try to explain this to someone and then they're like, oh, that sounds cool. Can I do an Excel file? You're like, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I do it with pictures? Or no.
Right.
One of the interesting things, though, now that you say that, one of the interesting things I got into here, one of Git's big features, right, is the ability to merge changes. So part of when we were talking about distributed version control, part of the distributed nature of version control is that I have a copy of the whole thing on my hard drive. You have a copy of the whole thing on your hard drive. We can both touch the same file, and then Git knows how to merge those changes, right? This is a common operation that happens every day in every Git repo on Earth, right? You can't do that with binary files. So Git LFS introduces this locking unlocking mechanism, which goes back exactly to the old school way of doing it that you were talking about earlier. You basically you enable this on certain types of files, and then those files are locked by default and are read only on your file system, and you have to, or sorry, they are unlocked and read only. You have to lock them in order to edit them, and that's sent to the server, so somebody else can't lock the same file at the same time. And then you unlock and then push, which is kind of funny. It's like we're losing all of the benefits of Git here.
Right. Yeah. But I think that, I mean, from how you've described it, it makes sense that it sounds like that's kind of just how you have to do it.
Yeah, there's really no other way. When you can't diff a file, you can't really merge a file. There's not really a way to do that makes sense, I don't think. So it doesn't really play nicely with that part of Git.
Yeah. Well, what are you gonna do?
I'm excited to play around more with this because I do a lot of things. I haven't talked too much on the podcast about it, but I do a lot of things around like creative coding and stuff like that in my side projects. It's very common to have a bunch of large images that either maybe it's not even so much about versioning in that case, but about just sharing, sharing the assets, right? It's pretty easy to put them in a Git repo and then clone it on a different machine that I want to work on them on.
Right.
Push some changes.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not even changes to the binary files, but it's helpful to have them in a Git repo.
Yeah, there's repos of like, I was looking at something the other day where like a programming language logo wasn't like loading right in my IDE, and I was like digging into it, and I was finding there's like Git repos that are just logos, like they just have tech logos, or like they just have programming language logos.
Really?
There's people who like just put like basically just information on a repo, like just here's all the cataloged logos of like Linux distro logos. Like here they all are. It's a whole thing.
I appreciate that. Doing God's work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Git LFS it's easy to see how that could be useful. I'm willing to bet there's a lot of people who have at least a couple big images in their repos. Maybe they don't ever change much, but there's definitely some big images that could probably use this kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the big thing is if you commit a big image, depending on how big, but like if you commit a big image one time, that's probably not the end of the world, because Git knows that if the file doesn't change, it's just going to reference the last version. So like you're not storing, just to be clear, you're not storing a version of it with every commit, but it's really when the file changes that those start adding up.
Right. Yeah.
One other thing I came across that I was going to mention that kind of struck me is like, oh yeah, of course, but it could be kind of a gotcha. If you try, everything went really smoothly for me when I tried this with a brand new repo with Git LFS enabled from the outset. If you try to enable Git LFS on a repo that already has history, all of the history of the repo will be rewritten.
Oh, really?
Because if you think about it, like all of those images are now going to be replaced with references. So it's worth reading up on that if you plan to do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
There's techniques. I didn't go too deep into it, but there's like migration techniques if you do need to do that.
Okay. Yeah, that is good to point out.
But yeah, I'm planning to use it. I thought it was super simple. I'm planning to use it in my everyday work.
How did you even find out about it? I don't think I'd ever heard about it until you said you wanted to talk about it.
I think I was struggling with that exact problem that we were describing, where I was just like, I have these, I have code alongside images, and I'd like to store those. For me, like I said, it's really more about like trying to work on it on multiple machines. Git is just a really good way to like, track. I have it on one machine. I want to get it to another machine. It's better than like zipping it and put it in Dropbox or whatever. Git repo is a great way to do that.
Yeah, like GitHub is like a great way to just keep track of just your config files and stuff, so that you have your configs all in one spot and you can always get to them.
Exactly.
And you can change them on one machine and then have them changed on other machines easily.
Just a centrally located repository. It's the right word.
What if we hosted this podcast on GitHub? What if we just had a repo with each directory was an episode, and then you could even have like the show notes in like a little markdown file, and you could even have code snippets and like links to stuff.
I mean, that'd be kind of awesome. Would people be able to listen to it?
I don't think there's an audio player in GitHub. You'd have to I guess you'd have to clone the repo and yeah. So
we could be like, new episodes drop on Tuesday, and be sure to pull.
Yeah. I guess that's not great.
Yeah, I imagine all the RSS feeds and stuff don't pick it up either.
Well, if you star the repo, then you'll get an email, or if you follow the repo on GitHub, right? I think you'll get an email if
there's new episode.
Yeah, new commit. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like there's an idea in there, like a social media podcasting platform that's also a code base. I don't know.
I mean, honestly, I love the idea of like having the show notes and code snippets alongside the audio for the podcast. I think that's actually a really cool idea. I think the problem is just going to be I doubt GitHub would be happy about lots and lots of people downloading large binary objects from our repo. I think at some point we'd have to start paying.
Yeah.
Because I think
Probably.
like if someone clones our repo, I think it costs us money. It's the way it works.
I don't know. I've never been like in charge of a paid enterprise repo. I've only been in control of like free repos.
When I tested it out, GitHub has a whole section where you can go look at your Git LFS usage. My little bit of testing didn't even register. I don't know. I don't know if it's like going to show up at some point or what, but my testing did not even register as like anything at all, which I thought was kind of weird.
But what did you test with? How big was the file?
Not huge.
Files.
Yeah, I was trying not to abuse it and not to run into any limits on the free tier.
Right.
They were like less than 10 megabytes. All the images I was using.
All right. Oh. This is actually kind of weird though, because now we're here and it's like I'm supposed to be transitioning into the whose side are you on, but now it's just like, oh, we're here, we're done, I guess.
I think that's a good ending of the episode. We're done, I guess.
Yeah, subscribe. I don't know. Whatever. No, thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it, actually.
Absolutely.
Truly. And see you next time.
See ya.
1x Developer Podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Colin. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for listening to this episode of the 1x Developer Podcast and let you know that if you have any questions, comments, or if you just want to tell us about your day, you can reach us at X, formerly known as Twitter, at 1x Developer Podcast. We're also on YouTube at 1x Developer Podcast. You can email us if you're weird at 1xdeveloperpodcast at protonmail.com. And lastly, don't forget to follow, subscribe, all that stuff, so you don't miss any further episodes of the 1x Developer Podcast. Thanks so much. See you next time.